Good to see everybody here. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. It's 12:30, so I got a really good bunch of people filing in here still. I'm real excited to see everyone. Happy New Year to everybody, and hopefully your 2021 is off to a really good start. Excited to go ahead and start season number 3 here, 3 Up, 3 Down with everybody. A lot of us have grown accustomed to the weekly, I guess you could call it, almost weekly lunchtime call. So it's good to see those faces and getting back in. Season 3 is all about preparing umpires for the upcoming season. I'm going to try and do this in 3 different parts. Today we'll take a look at preparing ourselves mentally and physically, so spend a lot of time there. And then in the future here, in the coming weeks, we'll take a look at building a program and what to do like locally in your district. And then the other part of that then too, we'll be starting to build a development program as well. So we're not going to necessarily outline a bunch of things of how-tos because I think everybody's situation is different. At any rate, what we'll do is kind of collaborate and come together and at least try and share some ideas of what we found has worked with you individually, with programs that you've been a part of, and then obviously what you've experienced so far. So excited to go ahead and get this season started off. And again, topic for us overall is preparing umpires for the upcoming season. And then today specifically, we'll take a look at preparing ourselves, getting ourselves right then mentally and physically here. I'm going to spend a lot of time here with the physical part of it. We had an opportunity to listen to a podcast and listen to an individual, Danny Parenza, who is contracted out by Minor League Baseball to work with their umpire staff to help them develop a fitness and nutrition plan. So kind of took some of her major takeaways. I'll pass those along to us to help us get ready for the physical part of the season. And then obviously we've got the mental part of it too. And everybody's situation is obviously going to look different here in the coming days. So without further ado then here, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here with everybody for you. I've got a little bit of a presentation for us. So I've got that out in front of us, and I'll go ahead and get ready to share some of these ideas. Now, the first thing that I'm going to go ahead and do is kind of talk to you a little bit about and kind of make sure that we start to think about this whole idea of preparing yourselves physically for the season. I know that it's currently January, so everybody is really dialed into the idea of fitness and nutrition, and it's a hot topic here right now. But for us, what I really want to kind of go ahead and take a look at for our purposes and what we've been thinking about are kind of 3 major questions. And I'm going to put us into breakout rooms here in just a second and give you an opportunity, number one, introduce each other, but really then focus on that first one, because I want to draw perspective to what it is that we're actually preparing ourselves to do. So many times guys will think that they have to go run a mile every day and lift every other day and this, that, and the other. And I think what's important for us to realize is that our plan has to be a functional plan, meaning then that whatever we decide to do, fitness, nutrition, and the mental part of it too, it's got to be then specifically tailored to what we're going to do. So 3 major questions, one of which, like I said, we're going to go ahead and go into breakout groups and work with. The other 2 we'll actually take a look at. The bottom 2 we'll take a look at more so together. But I'll put us into breakout rooms here in just a second. And the question I want you to go ahead and ponder is this. Think about the physical movements that we have to make every game that we've ever worked, either as the base umpire or the plate umpire. But think about those movements and what shape do we have to be in? So what physical movements must we be in shape to do? So think about, as the plate umpire, what things do I have to do throughout the course of the game? What do I have to do as the base umpire throughout the course of the game? And then begin to think about that list. And from that list, we'll be able to talk about developing a plan and things like that. So what I'm going to do here is put you into breakout groups. We're only going to spend about 3 or 4 minutes in those breakout groups. When you guys get there, you want you to do 2 things. Number one, obviously introduce yourselves, have people from around the central region and other regions too. So first order of business is very quickly introduce yourself. Remember, you only have about 3 minutes here. And then after that, think about then specifically and share out loud, kind of brainstorm together, what are the movements that we're required to do on the diamond that we've got to be ready to do by the time we go ahead and start things in March, April, or whatever the case may be. Okay? So those 2 things, introduce yourself and then think about the physical movements. Like I said, you'll have about 3 minutes to do so. We'll come back together. We'll call it 12:38. So 12:38 to go ahead and do so as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get these breakout rooms all ready to go. So this is going to put us into about 4 or 5 individuals per meeting group. And again, just to take a look at those 2 answers. Number one, go ahead and introduce yourself. And then secondly, go ahead and brainstorm what were the physical movements that we're required to do on a daily basis when we umpire games that we need to be in good shape with. All right. I'm I'm going to open all rooms. You guys will go ahead and be automatically populated in those rooms. I'll probably pop in here in just a second as well. All right. There we go. Everybody's headed off to rooms here now. Alrighty.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Jordan.
I think, yeah, you guys are all headed off to rooms here now. It should be almost just me left here.
Might keep,
Alrighty, well, I'll give those groups a little bit of time to go ahead and pop in for those of you guys that are listening on the replay here. So I'll give them a little bit of time to introduce themselves. And then again, just as we're getting ready to go ahead and have this conversation, kind of think here about the different types of demands that you guys are going to have physically out on the diamond. And again, that list of things that you're going to be required to do, that's what you're going to want to use and at least have that mindset, that context to kind of develop your workout plan here. So we'll go ahead and pop into a couple of different rooms here in just a second. But, as things are going on, think about those physical demands. What do we have to do on the diamond that are ultimately going to require us to make sure that we have some functional training here as we prepare for the season?
Your stretching because I got to get those quads loose, you know what I mean? So that's my input.
I have to agree. I think the legs are an important thing. Also, the starting and stopping sometime with sprints. I like to do some HIIT training to kind of do that where you're doing 20-second bursts with about a 10-second rest. But I also think the core is a predominantly important one because you're using that whether you're in the field or behind the plate.
Yeah,
that's the one thing I think of when it comes to physical preparedness is with the plate umpire.
I think it's also, we got to focus a little bit on the neck. I know going to chiropractor for the last 13 years, his big focus for me have been my neck and my lower back and hips, just due to the movement that we do and the foul balls we take off the head and everything like that. That's a question he asks me almost every time I come in is how many did you take off the face in the last week? Because that affects how we adjust my neck accordingly. So I think even some neck exercises, stretching, things like that, and strengthening of the neck, because it's just the way we have to sit and we have to hold our neck up with the mask on. That weight, even though the mask have gotten lighter and lighter over the years, it's still something that affects our movement as well. And then just going into
the sodas and stuff like that, and staying hydrated, obviously when the weather gets a little bit warmer. So
that's a good point. Yeah, my input would be along those lines too. Number one, legs, and number two, back and flexibility.
And I've got lower back issues myself, and yeah, lower back definitely.
and I'll just throw out there that I can, I'm gonna say, based on Gerald's picture up there, that he and I can relate. Scott, when you get a little more of the gray stuff,
Believe me, that's there.
you need a little more. You not only recovery time but prep time. So just kind of.
You really have to be conscious. Everybody knows it doesn't matter what athletic field we're on or court or anything else. It's always lower extremities. I mean, that's what gets us from point A to point B. So we really have to work on our legs and cardiovascular. Right off the bat.
Totally agree, Jamie. I think one thing that sometimes gets overlooked too, especially early season in Ohio and high school ball, like Dave, we have multiple layers of clothes on, and you want to make sure you're stretching your legs are prepared for that, because it's always the sudden burst that you end up hurting yourself. But I think the big thing that's overlooked that I've learned over time is we're only focused on staying hydrated in the dog days of summer. And I think that's important even at the early onsets of the season, is being properly hydrated, because that can eliminate some of the issues you're having with your lower extremities and staying stretched out. So that's one thing I have learned over time is focusing on hydration the whole span of the season, whether that's March to August, just not when it's July and August.
Yeah, I mean, coming down from what.
All right. Well, we got about a minute left here, so everybody should be starting to file back in here. So I think everybody's got about a minute to file back in. Some really good conversations here heard by everyone. So I'll go ahead and get ready to get everybody back in here. Good to see everybody file back in. Just to kind of throw some things out here, as a lot of people are starting to join back in. I was able to pop in, I think, to just about every group, and I was pretty impressed with the list. And I think that's really an important grounding piece. And obviously our experience has a lot to do with that. Like, everybody pretty much has the answers that I'm going to share with you. But at the same time, I don't know how intentional we have been with really focusing on those functional movements. So, great lists, great conversations were had by all. A lot of people talk about like the starting and stopping nature that we have constantly. Someone mentioned HIIT interval training, which I'll talk about here too. But there was a lot of focus on the core, the lower extremities, and all is exactly right. But again, I think the larger picture here for us to kind of consider is that as we start to build individual steps towards getting ready for the upcoming season, it's really important for us to make sure that we are being specific to those items here. So those are a couple different things here for us. If I can have them make sure everybody has their camera or everything muted here, that'd probably be good here. But and then just unmute yourself when we talk about things. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And again, a lot of you guys talked a lot about some of the stuff that we're going to touch base with. And I think, again, the major thing that we've got to have, at least in our mindset, is an understanding of what our functional training actually has to look like. So those are the physical movements. Like, we just got to make sure that we're able to get up the line, that we can pivot in and trail somebody into third base, that we can cover up to third base. And then not only do we need to be able to do that, but we've got to return to our positions without huffing and puffing, because it's really difficult to umpire while you are trying to recover from any of the physical movements that you have. So important to make sure that we go ahead and see those things here as we go ahead and put our program here together. Think about the muscle groups, which is what many of you guys already talked about here too. And then this last question we'll go ahead and attack as well. Should our off-season and in-season programs be the same? And that's something to consider, not only if you are somebody that is, just a baseball. Yeah. If you're working hockey, if you're working basketball here in the winter, that may also kind of dictate what exactly your plans look like. So let's take a look here at some of this stuff that has been passed along to us, specifically, as I mentioned, by Danny Parenza out of Anything Is Possible Training. And remember, she was a 2018 graduate of the Professional Umpire School.
Okay, no worries.
A lot of this stuff here at this particular.
Thank you, sir.
It was guiding principles here were a couple things. Number one here, don't hit the panic button. So many people think they've got to go on a binge diet or binge train, and they've got to make progresses like right now, or like, hey, we've got 2 months here between January and February, and you've got to be ready to go March 1st or in the middle of March. And that's not true. We want to have a gradual, incremental increase in the things that we are accomplishing here. So no need to binge diet, no need to binge train, but again, you're looking for gradual increases, gradual gains here at this particular time. So that's going to require some patience. Secondly, everybody's plan is going to look differently. Me sitting at 5'7" and 140 pounds, like, I'm going to focus more about putting on a little bit of muscle and then obviously building some cardio. Some of you guys may also think about, what your diet looks like. Maybe you're trying to lose a couple pounds, things of that nature as well. But I think the other thing to think about too is that if something hurts, try and find a way to work around it. Every program's, as a college basketball coach, what we do with our basketball team is drastically different than what our training program would look like for our baseball team. Like baseball guys don't do over the head stuff to protect their shoulders. Well, we do a lot of overhead stuff so that we can obviously work on finishing and things like that. But if something works, if something hurts, like your knee, like your shoulder, like your lower back, there are ways to go about and around to strengthen those things too. So continue to think about that one. And again, everybody's goals, everybody's body types are different. So, for me to like put out a plan, or for anyone to put out like a uniform plan, really difficult for you to do. And then lastly, find balance. Don't overwhelm yourself with just another thing to do. Sit down, take a look at your schedule, what fits, where does it fit, and where can I be consistent in that one? Realistically, how many days can you commit to? Because if all you've got is a 2-day window that you can commit to some of this fitness plans, then that's what you have to do. And that's how you have to feel a way to do it. And then the last thing that we oftentimes hear is to find a teammate. And I think it's really a unique time. And this is a really unique opportunity for us to kind of dive into our families, to maybe do like go on a walk with your wife, especially when the weather gets a little bit warmer. Take the dog out, for example, for a walk. Kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. Build relationships with your wife, with your family, whatever the case may be. You can also find a teammate. So I know several of us are on the call. Several of us have really great relationships across the central region and across obviously the country. So I mean, there's nothing stopping you from starting your own Zoom call and doing a workout with a couple of your friends as well, whether it be a half hour, 40 minutes, or whatever the case may be. So just a couple things to think about here in your guiding principles. Now, the other thing that I kind of took away from was this quotation that Danny shared. She said that it's not a weight issue so much as it is an appearance issue. And the more I thought about the feedback that I've often given umpires with regards to mobility and things of that nature at the regional, this is kind of what we're focused on. Like, we don't necessarily care how much you weigh. People don't, we're not the seventh branch of the military by any stretch of the imagination, but it's the appearance that matters. And not only is appearance how exactly you look in a uniform, and there's some truth to that, so appearance can be how you look in a uniform, but appearance is also the way that you are able to athletically get from point A to point B. So as we think about, New Year's resolution, getting ready physically for the season, don't just confine yourself to think about things as a weight issue. It's an appearance issue. Yes, you want to look great in a uniform, but the other thing too is, like I said, we want to look natural or look as comfortable as possible as we move from point A to point B. That way we don't have any significant mobility issues here. So pivots, starts, stops, all those kinds of things, some things to consider. Now, I would encourage you guys to put your own plans together. Number one, your body types. Number two, your kind of medical history, so to speak. And many of us have probably also consulted already with dietitians, with our doctors, with personal trainers, for example, and all that stuff's great. But I think the other thing too, for people who may not want to use those resources out there, is to also realize that YouTube has exploded with a lot of this stuff as well. So, you can type a lot of these different workouts. Like if I wanted a low intensity, low impact workout for cardio, I would just type that into YouTube, and you would be amazed at the personal trainers out there that have put stuff out for free, especially in 2020, as everybody trying to find a way to stay connected, stay busy, and obviously stay healthy. So as you're putting your plan together, a couple of things to think about. Number one, what are your things that you have to overcome in your body type, your injuries and things of that nature? Secondly, how much time can you put into it? And then thirdly, think about functional training here. So what Danny kind of mentioned here was that there were 4 different segments, I guess you could call them, of your plan: strength, conditioning, agility, and nutrition. And in listening to everybody talk a lot about things in those smaller groups, a lot of us hit on each of these different elements here. So if you think about I think the important thing for us to realize here is this idea of functional strength. Think again specifically, what exactly do we have to use frequently as umpires that have to be strong, have to be ready to prevent injuries from occurring? Quads, hamstrings. A lot of people complain of shin splints, especially early in the season here. That's all calf strengths and things like that. Think about pivoting and whatnot. That's your glutes, your hip flexors. And then obviously there's a lot of strain on what we do on our lower back, which is a little bit more of a function of great hamstring strength, and then obviously your quad strength as well. And I've heard a lot of people talk about lower extremities, and you're exactly right. So too is true then with your core, and then obviously your lower back. Some people are going to want to look to put on some muscles, such as myself. So I'll focus a little bit on my shoulders, my arms, back, and things of that nature too. So it's important to kind of differentiate the difference here between like what is functional strength, what's absolutely required for us as we're getting ready to go ahead and hit the diamond, versus just appearance sake. And again, be realistic with our goals and be patient with our goals there as well. Conditioning, same thing. There's a lot of different things there that are there. But again, realistically here, We just don't want to be trying to catch our breath and umpire at the same time. So, for example, if I have to go from A and track some 12-year-old over to third base on a triple, I don't want to go ahead and return back to C and have to be huffing and puffing and trying to umpire at the same time. Likewise, on the big diamond, if my partner leaves from A to cover catch, no catch, and I, the plate umpire, have to cover the batter runner into second base, I don't want to have to return to home plate and then call pitches while trying to recover. And that's where we essentially, the ability to make sure that we're not huffing and puffing and trying to recover and umpire at the same time, that's what's before us here in terms of conditioning. A variety of different elements there. Interval training, which I heard, Rich, I think you talked a lot about. That's kind of like a 20-second, then a minute, then a 20-second. But it really, you can type that into YouTube. You'd be amazed at what you find and what you learn there too. Same is true with low impact. For those of you guys with bad knees or ankles or whatever the case may be, or bad backs, you can do the same thing. Type into to Google, type into YouTube, low impact training or training to avoid pain in knees or something like that. And again, you'll be amazed at what people have out there. And I think you can put that program together. My wife does, for example, almost a YouTube workout a day, and it's about a half hour. And she just picks what muscle group she wants to work from. She turns the computer on, and for a half hour, she's right there and does her workout. And it's been a really good thing for her. I've participated in the same thing. And again, they're all out there too. Third element was agility. This is kind of our just make sure that we're preventing injury. But again, that idea of start, stopping, and pivoting without injury or without any strain. And there's a couple different examples there. For example, right now I'm on a 4-day workout where I lift for 4 days a week. I just started that one here in the new year. And then I'm doing some type of conditioning or trying to do some type of conditioning or agility the other 2 days with 1 day of rest. So that it can include things like yoga. If yoga interests you, you can potentially pair that up with your wife. Turn on the computer. You can type in yoga for beginners, choose a workout, and boom, right there it is to help you make sure that you're limbering up your core in different areas. And I think stretching and that agility is a huge piece of it as well. Last one's nutrition. Many of us, especially this time of the year, have done a really good job there. Macros is kind of the catchword right now in a lot of personal training and what they use. Macros just refers to the amount of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats your diet should have. And that's different for everybody's body type. And again, you'd be amazed at what you can type into Google, what you can type into YouTube, and what education you can find on that one. And a lot of you guys talked about hydration. That shouldn't be just only in the season or in the hot times, but that's obviously right now as well, because essentially we prepare ourselves here at this time. Okay, so 4 different elements there for us to kind of consider as we put our plans together. And again, I can't necessarily put a plan. No one can't put a universal plan in front of you and tell you, hey, do this. But ultimately, there are some things here that you can think about to, number one, meet your needs, your body type, and what your goals are here in each of these 4 categories: strength, conditioning, agility, and then lastly, nutrition. The last kind of thing here, the last major idea for us to consider here relative to our programs that we're going to develop is that we should have a different off-season focus than we have in-season focus. Because obviously, if you're somebody that's working, 4 or 5 nights a week, your training program should continue through the season, but again, it should be more functional maintaining here. So it's important to kind of notice the difference here in your off-season plan. That's a much more intense. And again, if anybody's working like hockey, basketball, or another sport all at the same time, kind of factor that into what exactly your workouts will look like. Okay, and those are all different components here of what we should see in our off-season, in-season, and end-of-season programs. And again, I don't think that this should be a program that we start and stop and just stop doing when the season picks up. If you get a rain out when the season happens, what's your plan then? You've got 2 hours that essentially you get back to your day. And yes, it's important to give back to your family and spend some of that time too. But, if you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, go for a walk with your wife or, cook a nutritious dinner or whatever it might be, maybe that could be a filler as well. So just some things here to think about as you begin to think about what your specific plan will look like. That way we're all in good shape. And again, remember, the goal here is to make sure that what we're required to do on the diamond, get up to the 30-foot line or up to the 45-foot line, cover third base, whatever the case may be, that we're not having to recover while huffing and puffing, trying to catch our breath and umpire at the same time. And that should be our larger goal here as we go ahead and put things together in our nutrition fitness plans here in the off season. Obviously, that starts now and continues on for the next 2 or 3 months to make sure we're ready to go right when the season hits. Now, the second part of the conversation here for us today is mental preparedness. And I kind of propose this question. And this is one that I think, we'll definitely come back to in next week's segment of 3 Up, 3 Down. We'll kind of start with this idea. But specifically, what do you want to get better at this season? And I think this is a question here that requires some time, some reflection, and things of that nature here too. So you want to chew on this essentially for a little bit and not come up with a right away answer. So specifically here, what exactly do you want to get better at this season? I know I've spent the last 2 years personally not only working on trying to get better at the wedge, but really getting better with my eyes. Timing, as we know, is a function of proper use of eyes, where we look up to confirm firm and secure possession before calling someone out. I worked with someone this fall, and we worked a lot together, and he was having some issues with plate mechanics, and all we basically focused on then was not head height, not drifting or whatever the case may be, but step number one was to make sure he was comfortable into getting into position. So we worked on a consistent cadence, and then sure enough, everything else then fell into suit. So think specifically what exactly you want to get better at this season, and really make it a short list and be patient within that list as well. A couple things here for us to go ahead and point out here with regards to this mental preparation as we start to think about, hey, what do I want to get better at? Number one, I think prioritizing your time is really, really important. Obviously, I've kind of got some of those priorities listed there as well. But in the context of umpire development, we'll often think about, clinics to go to and things like that, and that's all great. But at the same time, kind of budget out, plan out how exactly you're going to get better at something. So, for example, if one of your goals here in this preseason is to increase your knowledge of the rule book, well, how exactly are you going to do that? If your job or what you want to try and do is get better at, working the slot, how are you going to get better at doing that? So it's important not only to identify a goal, but also kind of think to yourself, how exactly am I going to do that? And then develop a plan. What does that look like, in week 1? What does that look like in week 2? And be impatient with yourself there. Now, I already mentioned this one. Be specific and be very small in your list here. 2 to 3 things specifically that you want to improve this season. I'm going to continue with proper use of eyes, and I can get better at my quiet steps and the timing of my quiet steps in the wedge. So those are really 2 things that I'm going to really work on here this season as well. And those are 2 things, and I think this is a key thing as well, is to share before your game. We pregame so often with our partners about kind of the technical, tactical parts of umpiring, but don't forget here too to kind of share and be vulnerable with some of the areas that you're specifically working on. So everybody that I work with here this season, I'm going to ask, well, how was my timing? How are my use of eyes on tag plays? Or how was my steps in the wedge? So I'm going to ask those individuals to look at that before the game, and we're going to reflect on that together after the game as well with accountability. And I'm going to reflect upon that naturally over the course of time as well. So continue to have that conversation both before and after the games, and then even with people across the region. Like I work a lot with Phil King, who's on the call as well. He and I talk quite a bit. Maybe we'll sit here and talk about, hey, this is what I'm going to work on this season. And I may call him up one week and ask him, hey, how's your slot working this season? And just don't be afraid to check in with each other and hold each other accountable there, because that's essentially then how we're going to get better. Last 2 things, and I've kind of already touched on this one, is how to make this part of a relationship. And I think that's huge, is to stay connected, especially in our current time here with the coronavirus and quarantines, and what the 2021 season will actually look like. But trying to find ways to make your mental and physical preparations part and allow you to connect with other people as well. And then the last thing here, and I'll talk about this throughout the stretch of 2020, is the idea of mindfulness, of umpiring present. The idea here is that nothing matters more than what you're doing when you're doing it. It's an old proverb that's out there. It's actually right above the door out of our locker room onto the court. That's what it says, is that nothing matters more. And the idea is that we just want to basically lose ourselves. We want to be present and focus on what we're doing. That way, when a lot of us who are working regionals and World Series right now, we don't necessarily have to turn on a switch when the lights metaphorically go on. That switch has got to be on every single time. And our focus, our intensity, our purposefulness, they've kind of got to be the same whether we are umpiring a regular season game, a district game, or if we're lucky enough to get a regional or World Series assignment. If your goal is one day to get to Lomity, you got to have that Lomity mentality. So as you're umpiring, if the score is 28-1, think about what you got to work on and get better at it. We can't take those reps for granted, especially in a time period right now where we're seeing fewer and fewer games thanks to the coronavirus and fewer opportunities. So make it count, essentially. The last thing that I'll kind of leave us with here with mental preparation before opening things up for questions and kind of wrapping things up here today is I think it's really important that what we do, especially in Little League as volunteers, is, when we step on the diamond, that's got to be one of, if not the best part of our day. Now, obviously, going home to our families is something that is my best part of my day. But ultimately here, I think we've got to be not only thankful and appreciative for the opportunity to work Little League baseball, but it's got to be the best part of our day. And if it's not, then we've got to find a way to either make it the best part of our day or maybe step away as well. But the mental side of things here, just as important as the physical side of it, to number one, make sure that we're trying to promote growth, that we're realistic with ourselves, and then lastly here, kind of finding a way to stay connected. Last thing here, I know I already said last thing a couple times, but is to just be patient with yourself in all these ideas of growth and development, whether they're with yourselves or with anybody else. I got this from Brad Stevens, and who knows who he stole it from. He's the head coach of the Boston Celtics. But there are 4 phases of competence. So, as we talk about the mental side of things where we want to try and get better at what we're doing and make improvements, realize that we all start at a different place and we're all going to finish somewhere as well. And we kind of have to be patient with ourselves along the journey. So whether it is a physical thing where we are training our cardiovascular system, trying to build muscle, a weight loss program, or whatever the case may be, realize here that we start at one of these stages and we just got to make sure that we continue to make that growth. And as long as we're making incremental growth and are patient with ourselves, inevitably by the end of what we're going to try and accomplish, something's going to be there for us to kind of hang our hats on. So just wanted to share a couple of those different ideas, those different thoughts. I know a lot of the feedback that we actually got in the survey asked us about what fitness programs, what nutrition programs are out there for umpires. The more I looked into it, the more I kind of thought, well, everybody's different. This looks different for everyone else. So realistically, what we wanted to do here at 3 Up, 3 Down was just trying to give everybody some ideas, some concepts to think about, to reflect upon, and realistically allow them to create their own programs functionally to help them then get ready for the program. All right. Well, that is really kind of all that I had to share over the physical and mental side of preparing for the season. And I thought you guys did a fantastic job at getting things all lined up in the small groups here. I'll go ahead and open it up for questions or comments here. And then if you guys have to jump off, obviously you're free to go ahead and jump off, but I'll hang on here with questions and things of that nature here. Before I go ahead and take questions, for those of you guys that do have to jump off, we will meet same time, same place next week, 12:30 next week. And what we'll be focusing on next week in the second phase of preparing umpires for the upcoming season, we'll be specifically then taking a look at building a program. So we'll get to put our heads together, share some ideas of what people do locally in districts and in states so that we can all then kind of build a program, mainly focused at recruiting and retaining those umpires as well. For those of you guys that got to hop off, thanks for being here. I look forward to seeing a lot of people next week. Hopefully you got something to think about here with regards to physical and mental preparedness for the season. We'll see you guys next week. And again, if you want to hang on, I'll hold on here for the rest of however long those questions come out to talk baseball, talk physical and mental preparations here as we all get ready for the 2021 season. But other than that, guys, thanks for being here. Look forward to seeing everybody next week, and we'll hold on for questions and answers here now at this time.